Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I want to salute American Action Forum and Doug Holtz-Eakin for the holding this conference, and really for trying to deliver on exactly that. And that is how to focus policymakers on both sides of the aisle, individuals in administration as well as in Congress, to begin all rowing towards the same direction, and that is finally to see about turning this economy around. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. We're now in the 9th month, if you will, of a new majority. And our majority hit the ground running in January with a clear sense of affecting real change. And I say that because we, just by makeup, are now 1/3 new members. 40% of that 1/3 are individuals who really don't know from serving in public office. They're individuals, like many of us, who came from the private sector, who really know the pain and the challenges people are facing out there, and they came to Washington for the right reason. And they were elected in a year in which there was a political wave, and have come as almost a moral compass for our conference. And they come with the notion they don't want to see tricks, they don't want any more gimmicks. They look at the numbers and say the math doesn't lie. It's time for us to solve the problem and produce results. Now, the change in mind that they have, and that we all have, has not come easy. I mean, suffice it to say, all of us have seen what's gone on in the last half a year plus, and there's been a struggle because the stakes are big. We're facing two crises in this country. The first is the federal debt crisis. That is something that has evolved and been exacerbated over several decades of fiscal mismanagement, of policies that have contributed to the hole that we're now in from a fiscal standpoint. Both sides have plenty that they can be blamed for, but we are trying to approach this in a way that we can all come together and solve it. The resolution at the beginning of August in the debt ceiling agreement provides a way, at least puts in place a process for us to begin to resolve the problem, to begin to manage down the debt and deficit. Now, the other crisis is something that directly affects the people that sent us here. It affects us all. It is this issue. It's the jobs and economic growth crisis. The challenge, I think, for all of us is to try and resolve both of these crises without trying to address one and hurt the other. Now, the President came to Capitol Hill last week to address the joint session of Congress, and he specifically came to try and speak to the second crisis, which was the jobs crisis. I will say that there certainly were areas that the President laid out that I believe we can work on together. There are potential areas of agreement. The President talked about the potential for progress on regulatory relief. The House Republicans have announced a fall agenda that is highly focused on rolling back regulations that have impeded job growth in the middle class. Just this week, we're putting on the floor a bipartisan measure that says no to the NLRB, that we shouldn't have a federal agency, a federal board, that begins to tell private entities where they can expand, where they can put investment in this country. So I'm hopeful that the President can put some meaning behind the words that he delivered. There's a potential for us to agree. The President also spoke about tax relief for small businesses and for employers. We agree with that. We agree now is not the time to raise taxes on anybody if we're trying to grow this economy. The President talked about infrastructure spending. We Republicans believe there is a great need in approaching the decaying infrastructure of this country, and we need to come up with a way to address it. We may have some differences in the methods by which we're going to do that. The President suggests an infrastructure bank. I, for one, am one that thinks that an infrastructure bank is something akin to creating a Fannie and Freddie for roads and bridges. Something we don't need to do. If we're going to be serious about prioritizing infrastructure spending, let's get the system straight. Let's create a spending process that has transparency to it and not put it in an outside entity that escapes the purview of oversight of Congress and taxpayers. But we also have some areas that we can work on in terms of reg relief on the infrastructure side. Right now, we know that states are required to have at least 10% of the monies that they're allotted set aside for projects, frankly, that aren't necessarily priority transportation projects. We have some permitting issues that we can get straight, that frankly could see the flow of monies to projects rather than to have it sit while the regulatory process stands in the way. The President also spoke about unemployment benefits. Now, he obviously mentioned that because there are a lot of people out of work, entirely too many people out of work, 14 million Americans out of work. That's equivalent to the population of Pennsylvania. There are 4 million people, equivalent to the population of Kentucky, that have been out of work for a year or more. It's unacceptable. I see why the President feels for those people. What we need to do in fashioning a way forward in unemployment benefits is look to see around the country what works. And what works is work. It's a job. Unemployment benefits should not turn into a permanent solution. We should somehow connect unemployment benefits with work and job opportunity. These are the kind of reforms that we Republicans would like to work with the President on. Now, some of the things that I think are troubling about the President's remarks are this. First of all, it is his message of it is all or nothing, take it or leave it, pass my plan. Now, that's just not the way I think anything works, and certainly not the way that Washington works. We've been there, done that for the last 8 months. Just this morning, though, we saw David Axelrod on television saying it again. He said it's not an a la carte menu. You have to vote it up or down, take it or leave it. Again, that's not the spirit with which I think the people of this country would like to see us go forward with. Now, the President's plan also has in it a significant amount of what I would call stimulus spending. Now, we've also seen stimulus spending before, and given the promises that were made, I think, at least I would say, that the stimulus program was a failure. Why would we want to go do something like that again? Especially when we've got this federal debt crisis of borrowing money to fund government spending that has not produced the jobs result that we would like. Now, the President has also mentioned that he will send up a paid-for bill, or as he calls it, a deficit reduction bill. In it, he calls for significant tax hikes. As you know, Republicans do not support raising taxes if you want to grow the economy. It's that simple. But the President also likes to talk about taxing the super wealthy, the millionaires, the billionaires, and the jet owners. Well, his proposals just are not that simple. Looking at the impact of his policies in increasing taxes on people making $200,000 and up, what you see is a tax on the very people you expect and want to create jobs. What we also have found out through looking at his proposals, or at least the reports, is his tax proposals are actually going to impose taxes on charitable contributions. And in fact, impact at least 40% of tax-deductible charitable contributions. I don't think there are many Americans right now who think that's a good idea. The question is, why do we want to put an impediment in the way of charities accessing funding when the charities are the ones out there helping the people in need right now? It doesn't make sense. Also, I would say that in looking at the proposals thus far, it looks as if this tax increase will also affect the ability for states and municipalities to borrow money. Because as we know, there is a tax deduction afforded for the interest on those borrowings. Now, on the one hand, the president calls for giving money to states through stimulus spending, and on the other, he's calling for making it more expensive for states to do that. It's just nonsensical. Again, these are areas of disagreement. I will say again, I don't believe that we should allow areas of disagreement to get in the way of trying to come together on the areas we can agree on and produce results for people that sent us here. Again, the people expect no less. Now, in closing, I would say this, in listening to the president the other night in the chamber, something struck me in what the president termed a fair shake. Because I have talked a lot about America and the sense among so many people that somehow they feel they no longer have a fair shot. And so I think that there is some sense that we may be talking about the same thing. Somehow we've got to reignite the confidence and optimism of this country among the American people. But I believe there are very, very strong differences about the vision of how we get there, of how we get to that fair shot for people again. And the president himself has said that there are going to be big differences, and I think certainly the American people understand that. The Republicans and Democrats don't and aren't going to agree on everything. And the president will then say that some things are left for the election. And maybe the issue of taxation, maybe some of these other issues will have to be left for the election. Because I do think that what we're headed for over the next 14 months is a season in which there will be a robust debate culminating in November 2012 about the very question of who we want to be as a country. I believe that who we are as a country is a place where most people came because they did want that shot, that opportunity at earning their own success. The difference is, I believe, on the other side, and through the president's policies, the policies being promoted get in the way of that. They get in the way of entrepreneurs, of the immigrants who came here decades or centuries ago to make it. The policies in place right now make it more difficult for individuals to go at it on their own. There is a sense in this town that somehow Washington's job is to guarantee the success of everybody. I don't think that that's what America and our country is about. I think it is about freedom, it is about opportunity for everyone. And if there is an impediment in the way of someone having that opportunity to earn success, that's where the government is properly situated to remove that impediment and ensure that success can be had through earning it, through working hard, playing by the rules, and seeing it come. So, again, there are big differences, but I do think now's the time for us to try and set them aside, try and see if we can deliver results, and that will be the job for us in Congress as we go forward over the next several months. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That concludes our forum today. Before we go, I'd like to acknowledge, the chairman of the American Action Forum,